All right, so we'll start by talking a little bit about the structure of the leaf, which is important to just be familiar with whenever we start looking at photosynthesis. The most important things to be familiar with are the guard cells and the stomata. So the stomata are going to be the pores, or essentially the holes in the leaf that allow water to go in and gases to go in and water to come out, and gases to come out as well. The guard cells regulate the size of the pores, so they regulate the size of the stomata or whether or not they are open or closed. So if it's really hot and the plant is trying to conserve water, the guard cells will close the stomata so that those pores are closed. The other layers are important too. You have the epidermis, which is the outside layer. You have the palisade and the spongy mesophyll, which are going to be where the chloroplasts are found. But most importantly are those guard cells and those stomata. You can certainly take a look at what the other ones are and fill those in if you would like. But in general, the most important are what I mentioned. The next important part of the plant cell are to look at the chloroplasts. And so we talked about chloroplasts and the fact that they have a double layer because of the endosymbiotic theory, which means that the chloroplasts were a prokaryotic organism that was engulfed by another. The reason why the chloroplasts are green is because they have chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a pigment which is going to absorb light, which is important because photosynthesis is taking light energy and converting it into chemical energy. The key parts of the chloroplast, so we have the outer membrane and then we have the inner membrane. The inner membrane has foldings, and these foldings are going to be sac-like photosynthetic membranes, which are called thylakoids. So those thylakoids are going to be each individual little disc here. Whenever I think of thylakoids, so I think of this individual disc. If you have a stack of them, then we call them a grana or a granum. And I like to think of them like Thin Mints. So the granum would be the sleeve of Thin Mints, and then the thylakoid would be each individual Thin Mint inside of that sleeve. Okay. Whenever we are looking at thylakoids and why they're important or why their membranes are important, this is because the light-dependent reactions of photosynthesis occur on the thylakoid membranes. The other important part of the chloroplast is the stroma, and that is going to be the space inside of the chloroplast. The space inside of the chloroplast is important because this is where the light-independent reactions will take place. And we'll take a look at both the light-dependent and independent reactions whenever we look at our overview of photosynthesis. For the last little bit about the structure, we talk a little bit about the pigments. And the pigments that are going to be inside of the chloroplasts are things like chlorophyll. There are also some accessory pigments called carotenoids. And the chlorophyll and the accessory pigments are going to observe certain wavelengths of light. This is going to help the plant to capture light energy and then allow it to convert it into chemical energy. Whenever we look at chlorophyll, chlorophyll is going to be green, and so it's going to actually absorb violet and orange light but reflect green light. Chlorophyll B is another type of chlorophyll. It will absorb blue-violet and it will reflect green. So the reason why plants look green is because they're actually reflecting green light. And so it will absorb other visible light and then use that energy that it absorbs to excite electrons and then transfer them. Other accessory pigments like carotenoids are going to absorb violet and blue-green, and they'll reflect red, orange, and yellow. So if you've ever wondered why plants look the way they do in the fall, this is actually because chlorophyll is going to degrade in the low temperatures, so it's going to break down, and so then those other accessory pigments are reflecting those fall-like colors that we see. On your next page of notes, you can write down a little overview about photosynthesis. And whenever we look at photosynthesis, really what we're looking at is how light energy is being used to convert water and carbon dioxide into chemical energy in the form of sugar and oxygen. And photosynthesis, with all the details that we talk about, boils down to that. The reactants are water and carbon dioxide, and the products are glucose, which is sugar, and oxygen. So this is just an example. Glucose is just an example of sugar. Whenever we look at photosynthesis, we are going to say that our equation is this in symbols. I think this is a good equation to know and be familiar with because it should help you to further understand what that process is. In photosynthesis, we have two steps. So we have light-dependent reactions and then light-independent reactions. Our light-dependent reactions are going to be on the left-hand side in this picture, and during these reactions, we're going to use water and light in order to produce oxygen and then some high-energy electron carriers. What happens here is that light comes in, and it's going to excite electrons in the chlorophyll. So the chlorophyll is going to absorb the light, and it's going to create these electrons that have a lot of energy. These electrons are going to be passed on to high-energy electron carriers in the form of NADPH and then also ATP. After the light-dependent reaction, so we've produced oxygen, which is a byproduct of photosynthesis, and it's going to then take the electron carriers and take them over to the light-independent reactions, which are also called the dark reactions or the Calvin cycle. During the light-independent reactions, then carbon dioxide is going to be used, and the energy from those electron carriers is going to be transferred, and then sugars are going to be made. And so in photosynthesis, we make oxygen and we make sugar, but they're produced during the two different steps of photosynthesis. Whenever we look at high energy electron carriers, just to give you a little bit more detail, these are going to happen because there are electrons in chlorophyll that are energized or excited by the light, and so electron carriers are going to be something that accept a pair of electrons. So when we look at this in photosynthesis, we say that our electron carrier is going to be our NADPH, and the electron acceptor is that NAD+. And so we have NAD+, it accepts the electrons, and then NADPH will take that energy from those electrons to the next step. This is kind of like an energy bus or some sort of energy carrier, but this is the way that we can take the light energy and capture it to be used to help build glucose, which would be energy in the form of chemical energy. In summary, chlorophyll is going to absorb light energy. The absorption makes high energy electrons, and the electron acceptor is going to get that electron energy and form NADPH. NADPH is going to carry the high energy electrons to the light independent reactions inside of the chloroplast in order for there to be sugar that will be made.